They say home is where you feel safe, where you can let your guard down, let your child draw dinosaurs on the sidewalk and believe the world is still good. But what happens when someone knocks? Not to visit, but to take that feeling away. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just wanted to protect my daughter. They came in uniforms that looked real enough, with words that sounded like law. But I knew the truth. I'd seen it before in different countries, under different flags. And this time, it wasn't a war zone. It was my driveway. This is the story of how I fought back, not just for my child, but for every family they thought would stay silent. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come with a badge. Sometimes it comes with a mother who refuses to step aside. It was the kind of morning that made Rachel McCall feel almost human again. The Arizona sun hadn't fully claimed the sky yet, and the air was still soft from the night's chill. A faint breeze rustled the mesquite trees along the sidewalk, carrying the scent of desert sage and warm concrete. Birds chirped in lazy intervals, and the far-off hum of someone's lawn trimmer provided a white noise that felt more suburban than intrusive. Rachel stood barefoot on the porch of her small house in Prescott Valley, her coffee cooling between her fingers. She wore an old army sweatshirt and a pair of faded jeans, her dark auburn hair tied up in a practical twist. Her eyes tracked every movement on the street, not out of paranoia, just habit, the kind that never left you after 12 years in Border Patrol Tactical. But for once, everything was still. Down by the curb, her daughter Chloe, 6 years old and endlessly curious, was crouched over the driveway with a tub of sidewalk chalk. She was drawing a Stegosaurus, a clunky, smiling one with pastel green spikes and a heart-shaped tail. Every few strokes, she'd pause to explain her progress in precise, dramatic fashion. "This one's a mom," Chloe said without looking up. "She has really strong legs. Like yours." Rachel smirked into her coffee. "That right?" "Mm-hmm. Nobody messes with her, even T-Rexes." Rachel's chest ached gently, in the best way. She took a sip and let herself lean into that warmth. For 6 months, this little cul-de-sac had been a refuge, quiet, predictable. After everything she'd seen, after the deployment that broke her marriage, after the legal battles for custody, this place was her line in the sand. She would raise Chloe here, safe, free from chaos. Or so she thought. It started with the sound of an engine, low, controlled, out of place. She turned her head just in time to see a black SUV roll around the corner. Clean, newer model, windows dark enough to hide a face. It moved slowly, not in the way a lost neighbor does, but like a lion tracking something it already decided was prey. Rachel set her coffee down. The SUV coasted to a stop directly in front of her house. Chloe didn't even look up. She was adding yellow flowers around the dinosaur's feet. 2 men stepped out. They wore navy blue uniforms, standard cut. But something felt off. The fabric was too crisp. The patches on their shoulders read, HOA Compliance Patrol. But they had no visible IDs, no nameplates, and certainly no badges. Each wore a utility belt with flashlights, faux radios, and cheap-looking stun batons clipped in place, like they were proud of them. Rachel's pulse slowed. Not from fear, from precision. She stepped down off the porch, placing herself between the men and her daughter. The taller one had a buzz cut and the posture of someone who expected people to flinch when he spoke. "Ma'am," he began with mock authority, "you're in direct violation of Section 6B of the Community Code. Unauthorized defacement of shared visual zones." Rachel blinked. "What?" The shorter one flipped a clipboard dramatically. "Graffiti," he said, pointing at the chalk. "Non-approved markings. HOA regulations prohibit non-compliant visuals visible from the street." Rachel's tone flattened. "There is no Section 6B. And this isn't graffiti, it's chalk. Washes off with a hose." "We've documented it," the tall one said, pulling out his phone. "Standard protocol." Rachel's voice dropped. "You're not with the HOA." The shorter man smirked. "We're subcontractors." "For what? Baby snatching?" He stepped forward. We have the right to enforce code compliance. If the guardian refuses, we escalate. His hand twitched toward Chloe. Rachel's eyes went hard. You touch my kid, she said calmly, and you'll need an ambulance before you need a lawyer. But the man didn't stop. He reached out and grabbed Chloe's wrist. Chloe gasped. Rachel moved. She didn't remember making the choice. Her body did it for her. She covered the ground between them in 2 strides, slammed into him with a shoulder check that knocked the air from his lungs and swept his legs out with one fluid, ruthless motion. He hit the ground with a dull thud. Chloe screamed. Rachel spun, scooped her daughter behind her, and turned to face the second man who had drawn his fake baton and now looked like he was reconsidering his life choices. From behind the porch, another voice cut through the chaos. Now! It was Brian, Rachel's younger brother, a home security installer who'd been watching everything unfold from the kitchen window. He moved fast, too fast for someone with soft eyes and a tech nerd's wardrobe. The second man didn't see him until Brian's arm wrapped around his neck from behind in a flawless chokehold. They crashed into the hedge, then silence. Rachel held her ground until she heard the plastic rattle of zip ties and Brian's voice. Secure. She turned back to Chloe, who was wide-eyed but unhurt, clinging to Rachel's sweatshirt. You okay, Bug? Rachel asked, crouching low. Chloe nodded. He said I was in trouble. Rachel brushed the hair from her face. You're not. You drew a dinosaur. He's the one who's in trouble. From the street, neighbors began to emerge, phones in hand, voices murmuring. Is that Rachel? Wait, what just happened? Did that guy grab a kid? Sirens began to wail in the distance. Rachel stood, hands steady, chest rising slow. The man she'd taken down groaned on the pavement. Brian emerged, dragging the second one by his vest, depositing him like a sack of trash at the end of the driveway. Rachel looked down at them both. You have no badge, no authorization, no name, she said coldly. But you picked the wrong driveway. The cruiser lights were still spinning when Rachel stepped onto her porch with a fresh towel over Chloe's shoulders. The girl's cheeks were flushed from adrenaline, but her eyes, wide, steady, were locked on the back of the squad car where the 2 fake enforcers now sat, zip-tied and silent. Will they come back? Chloe asked quietly. No, baby, Rachel replied, brushing a hand over her damp hair. Not now. Not ever. But even as she said it, her gut twisted. She knew predators. She knew how they moved, rarely alone, rarely stupid. These 2 weren't amateurs playing dress-up. Their approach was too coordinated, their jargon too rehearsed. And that SUV didn't just happen to stop here. This wasn't random. Officer Miles, the responding unit's lead, climbed the porch steps and joined her. We ran their plates. Fake. VIN's been scratched. That SUV was ghosted. Rachel nodded grimly. No IDs, no fingerprints in the system, he added. Their batons are modified cattle prods, illegal in this state. But they're not saying a word. Just keep repeating they're enforcement contractors. For who, they won't say. They tried to take my kid, Rachel said, her tone flat. That's not enforcement, that's a snatch and run, Miles exhaled slowly. We'll dig, but if this is bigger than 2 guys and a clipboard, we'll need more than just bruises and chalk drawings. Rachel turned toward the street, watching the neighbors still lingering like shaken birds after a storm. I might have someone who can help. That evening, after Chloe was asleep with a nightlight on and her favorite Stegosaurus plush tucked under her arm, Rachel picked up her phone and made a call she hadn't thought she'd ever need to make again. Hector Velez, the voice answered after one ring. Rachel hesitated. You still tracking those fake HOA cases? A long pause. I knew one of them would get bold eventually, he said. What happened? They grabbed my daughter. Silence. Then, I'll be there in the morning. Hector arrived just after sunrise. Stocky, clean-cut, ex-cop through and through. He wore a worn denim jacket and had the kind of eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by anything. He hugged Rachel like an old soldier greeting another survivor, then stepped back and got straight to business. "I've been following incidents like yours for 7 months," he said, sipping burnt diner coffee in her kitchen. "Started in Tucson, moved through Gallup, then up here. Same profile. Families with kids, usually in quieter HOA-run neighborhoods. Fake violations, fake uniforms, real consequences." "You said families," Rachel asked. "Did they ever succeed?" Hector's jaw clenched. "One case in Santa Fe. Kid was taken. 3 hours. Parents paid $5,000 in fines and the kid was returned unharmed, but traumatized. They refused to talk after that. HOA blamed a security contractor mix-up. No charges were ever filed." Rachel felt her pulse rise. "Why isn't this on the news?" "Because no one fights back. Most people just want it to go away. And HOA politics are a legal swamp. People assume it's just overreach, not criminal." He pulled out a folder. "These guys operate like a ghost HOA enforcement group. They use language that sounds legit, wear just enough uniform to intimidate, and target homes with vulnerable appearances. Single parents, elderly, immigrants. It's not about rules. It's about pressure. Make them afraid, make them comply." Rachel opened the file. Photos. Handwritten notes. A map with red pins marking incidents. And there it was. Prescott Valley. Her street, her house, circled in red. That night, while Chloe slept again, Rachel sat in front of her home security monitors, reviewing footage from the past 2 weeks. She slowed the footage, zoomed, rewound, and then she saw it. The same black SUV had driven by 4 nights earlier, slowly. Lights off, someone leaned out briefly, taking a photo of her house. And again, 2 nights before that. Different driver, same vehicle. They had scoped her out, more than once. Rachel saved the clips. She stared at the screen, her jaw clenched tight. They weren't just looking for rule breakers. They were hunting. "Your house was targeted," Hector said the next morning. "Same vehicle was seen circling neighborhoods in Flagstaff. Always between 6 and 7 a.m. That's when parents are distracted, prepping for work. No one's looking." He flipped to a grainy printout. 4 attempted code enforcement interventions in 3 weeks. 2 parents paid on the spot, cash, no receipts. 1 woman was told she'd be fined $1,000 a day unless she removed her daughter's sidewalk art. Rachel rubbed her temples. "And no one reported this?" "Most assumed it was legit. Until now, no one had footage, or the skills to fight back." He looked at her with something like respect. "You just became the first domino." The call came in at 2:47 p.m., just as Rachel was replacing the batteries in one of her driveway motion sensors. Officer Miles's voice was clipped, low tight with urgency. "You're going to want to come down to impound, now." By the time she and Hector arrived at the secure lot behind the precinct, the late-day sun was dragging long shadows across the asphalt. The black SUV, still looking polished, almost smug-sat, parked behind a cordon of yellow tape. It felt less like evidence, and more like a predator, waiting to be let off the leash. Detective Rena Flores, newly assigned to the case, met them at the gate. Sharp-eyed, mid-30s, with the coiled energy of someone who had no patience for bureaucracy, but was really, really good at working around it. She gestured them inside. "We cracked the rear panel of the SUV, false bottom beneath the trunk carpet. This wasn't just gear storage. This was an ops box." Inside, laid out across a stainless steel table, were the contents of the hidden compartment. Rachel stared at the array, her stomach turning slow and cold. 3 prepaid burner phones, stripped of SIMs. A dozen white plastic zip ties, looped and ready. Folded stacks of HOA citation slips, pre-filled, with fake signatures. 4 Polaroid photographs of children, one of them, unmistakably, Chloe, standing in front of their mailbox. A plastic file box, the kind you'd buy at Staples for organizing taxes. Flores snapped on a pair of gloves and opened it. Inside, printouts of Google Maps addresses, handwritten notes, Approximate times of day for neighborhood patterns, names, ages, family structures, lawn photos, HOA complaint forms. Even mock violation tickets claiming things like unsanctioned child conduct and unsightly chalk imagery. At the top of the stack, someone had scrawled in block letters, "Target zones, low resistance, high response." Rachel's jaw clenched. Hector muttered a curse under his breath. "This isn't just harassment," Rachel said. "This is a damn playbook." Detective Flores nodded grimly. "They're organized, tactical. They scout, map, test the reaction, then return to escalate. Most families don't have security systems, or they're too scared to challenge authority, especially when the enforcers show up with forms and uniforms." "And children?" Rachel asked. Her voice didn't shake, but it was quieter now. "Why include kids?" Flores hesitated before answering. "The fastest way to force a parent into compliance isn't fines, it's fear. If a child is threatened, you'll sign anything, pay anything." Silence fell over the room. Then Hector stepped forward, flipping through the folders more aggressively. "These aren't just targets," he said. "They're stages. Look, some names are marked red, some green, and a few have check marks. These guys weren't just trying things out. They were running cycles." Rachel leaned over his shoulder. Sure enough, her own address had a red check mark. Chloe's name was circled twice. There was even a note, "Dog, none. Security cams, front-facing only. Mother, ex-military, confirm." She felt something tighten in her chest. These people had been watching her, cataloging her weaknesses, planning for the moment she froze, a moment that never came. "They wanted submission," she whispered. "They got resistance." That evening, Rachel sat on her back porch, watching the desert sunset bleed across the horizon. Chloe was inside, drawing again, this time on paper, with crayons, under a freshly changed lock and double-secured alarm system. Hector came out with a beer in each hand. "One of the phones pinged a tower south of Sedona before it was wiped," he said. "We're running the number through the federal grid. Might take time." Rachel took the beer, but didn't drink. "You think there are more of them?" she asked. "Yes. And I think they know we're onto them now." He paused. "They'll either scatter or push back hard." Rachel turned her eyes to the darkening skyline. "Then let them. I've fought worse. And this time, I have something worth defending." The next day, Officer Miles contacted them with another lead. "We got a partial facial match on the shorter guy run through a private database tied to a decommissioned private security firm out of Nevada. Name, Kyle Dorsey, former security consultant. Dishonorably discharged. History of impersonating law enforcement in civil disputes." That firm? It used to run contracted neighborhood patrols in Las Vegas and Phoenix before being sued for harassment and shut down. Rachel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "This isn't a rogue group. This is what's left of a system that used to be legal." Hector exhaled slowly. "And now they're freelance, with no leash, no oversight, just the same training and worse intentions." That night, Chloe asked a simple question as Rachel tucked her in. "Are the bad guys still out there?" Rachel hesitated, then answered honestly. "Some of them, yeah." "Are they scared of you now?" Rachel smiled faintly. "They should be. The decision to bait them wasn't made lightly." Rachel had spent most of her life avoiding unnecessary conflict. Ironically, after a career built entirely around surviving it. But this wasn't about making a point. This was about ending a threat that had wormed its way into neighborhoods like hers, hidden behind clipboards and phony citations. "We don't need to catch everyone," she told Hector. "We just need to make someone talk." The plan was simple in theory, risky in practice. Create a false profile of a vulnerable new resident, a single father, recently relocated, renting a home without security cameras, with a child around Chloe's age. Brian, her brother, helped build the digital footprint, fake HOA forms, property tax transfers, a fake neighborhood app post asking if the community has strict chalk or toy rules my daughter loves to draw. It was subtle, purposefully harmless. Hector made sure the address used, an empty rental 2 blocks over, matched the exact pattern seen in the group's target files. Then they waited. It took less than 36 hours. At 4:12 p.m., a dark gray van, different make, but same feel, turned onto the quiet street and parked half a block from the decoy home. 2 men got out. Different uniforms, same style. No plates. One of them had a clipboard, the other a duffel bag. Rachel watched from a hidden camera feed inside the decoy house, her heartbeat steady. Brian, hidden in the upstairs hallway, monitored audio. Hector, 2 doors down in an unmarked SUV with Detective Flores, spoke into a throat mic. Targets confirmed. No city tags. Engaging false inspection. The men approached the door, knocked 3 times, then waited. After 60 seconds, they pulled out what looked like a notice of compliance failure and began photographing the porch and yard. Then one of them walked around the side gate, into the backyard, where Rachel was waiting. She moved like breath, from shadow to motion in a blink, grabbing the man's wrist as he stepped past the trash bins. He let out a stunned gasp before she had him face down in the gravel, a knee on his spine, zip tie cinched in less than 4 seconds. "One down," she muttered into her mic. The second man, still out front, turned just in time to see the SUV doors open on both sides. Flores and Hector approached, badges raised, guns low but visible. He ran. Bad choice. He made it 6 feet before Brian stepped out of a neighbor's side yard and leveled him with a stun round from a non-lethal launcher, a little gift borrowed from an old SWAT friend. The man dropped. Flores was already cuffing him before he stopped twitching. Inside the van, they found more of the same. Printouts of the fake profile Brian had seeded. 2 burner phones with encrypted group chats. A satellite image of Rachel's actual house, dated 3 days prior. And, in the front console, a digital recorder labeled compliance logs. The trap hadn't just worked. It had confirmed something darker. They hadn't given up on Rachel. They had come back quietly with a new plan, and she had beaten them to it. Under Flores' supervision, the 2 men were separated and interrogated. One refused to speak, silent, unmoving, calculating. The other, younger, twitchy and terrified, lasted 4 hours before he cracked. "It's not just here," he whispered. "There are cells in other states. They get names from real HOA databases. There's a guy runs the logistics. Colin Driggs. He used to run security for a developer in Vegas. He said we were taking neighborhoods back from the unruly. Said if we got people to comply before they knew better, the properties could be transitioned." Rachel leaned in. "What does transitioned mean?" "Sold, flipped. Once families leave, the lots get reported as vacant. Sometimes developers buy them with fake appraisals. No one checks if it was voluntary HOAs, just file the paperwork." Hector slammed his fist against the table. "You weren't code enforcers, you were muscle for property laundering." The young man nodded, shaking. "They pick easy targets. Families who won't fight back. Mothers alone, elderly, immigrants. Kids were leverage. They thought, if they scared them enough, they'd leave." That night, Rachel sat in her living room as the sun dipped low behind the ridge. Chloe sat at the table nearby, drawing again. But this time, her stegosaurus wasn't smiling. It was roaring. A cape flared behind it, and beside its feet stood a small, stick-figure girl, holding its tail. "Is this me?" Rachel asked softly. Chloe nodded. "You're the dinosaur. I'm just helping you stomp the bad guys." Rachel blinked back, something hot behind her eyes. "You're helping more than you know, kiddo." The arrests in Prescott Valley sent a ripple, then a wave. Within 48 hours, the information pulled from the burner phones, the van's GPS logs, and the recorded interrogation were packaged and sent through federal channels. Flores contacted a friend at the Arizona Attorney General's office. Hector called an old DEA contact in New Mexico. Rachel reluctantly but firmly, gave a sworn video statement to be shared with law enforcement task forces across 3 states. By the weekend, 4 more individuals connected to the rogue HOA enforcement ring had been picked up, 2 in Las Vegas, 1 in Flagstaff, and 1 attempting to board a flight in Reno using a fake Department of Housing ID. But it was the hard drive found at the home of Colin Driggs, the alleged leader of the operation, that blew the case wide open. It contained invoices from real estate development firms, audio recordings of internal meetings discussing pressure-based transition strategies, lists of non-compliant homes with notes like, female head of household, likely fold under legal pressure, templates for fake violations, structured around real HOA guidelines, and most damning of all, a financial trail tying the extortion schemes to property acquisition deals worth over $12 million in 3 states. The plan had been clear: use fear and false authority to drive residents out, then buy the homes cheap, flip them, and profit. And Chloe's chalk drawing? That had been marked in their system as a visual anchor for soft justification. It wasn't just predatory. It was methodical. Rachel sat across from Detective Flores and 2 federal agents in the Prescott PD's briefing room. Hector sat beside her, his expression unreadable. "You didn't just expose a criminal ring," one of the agents said. "You exposed a hole in our entire property enforcement system." Rachel said nothing. She didn't want credit. She wanted it over. "They underestimated the wrong woman," Flores added quietly. "If they hadn't touched your daughter, they would have hit someone else's," Rachel said, her voice flat. Outside, the story was beginning to spread. The video of the second takedown, Rachel restraining the man in the decoy backyard, was leaked by a neighbor's camera and hit local social media first. But when a Phoenix news outlet picked it up, and then national journalists began asking questions, it went viral. Headlines exploded. Fake HOA officers busted in suburban property scam. Veteran mom fights off enforcement imposters targeting families. The chalk drawing that took down $1 million crime ring. People were outraged, empowered, scared, but above all, they were paying attention. Rachel's porch filled with letters. Emails flooded in. Mothers across the country sent drawings from their own children. Veterans offered support. Law firms reached out pro bono to sue the developers named in the documents. A class action suit was quietly forming. "I think we broke the dam," Hector said one night. "They've been doing this for years, and no one ever fought back loud enough for the world to hear." Rachel stared at the stack of letters, some angry, some thankful, all shaken. "It shouldn't take someone almost losing their kid for people to listen," she murmured. But not everyone was grateful. An anonymous flyer showed up taped to her garage one morning. It read, "Stop turning your kid into a media circus. HOA rules exist for a reason." No signature, no return address. Rachel didn't hesitate. She called Flores, who dispatched a cruiser. By noon, the entire block had new neighborhood watch volunteers. Brian installed a new security light system, motion-triggered, with facial recognition capability. "Let them come again," he said grimly. "This time, we light up the whole damn street." Then came the city council meeting. Prescott Valley's leaders had long been silent on HOA overreach, preferring to let associations govern themselves. But the public pressure following Rachel's case was too loud to ignore. Rachel didn't want to speak. She hated microphones, hated the look people gave her now, half awe, half pity. But Chloe insisted. "You told me we don't hide from bullies, remember?" So Rachel stood in front of a packed room and streaming cameras and told her story, not with rage, not with tears, just the truth. How they came, what they did, what they planned, how they almost got away with it. This isn't about chalk or HOA rules. This is about what happens when people in fake uniforms knock on your door and make you feel like your home isn't yours anymore. The room went still. Then the applause began. That night, Chloe drew again, this time on Rachel's bedroom mirror, with dry erase markers. a stegosaurus with a shield and sunglasses. Next to it, in her clumsy handwriting, "My mom keeps us safe." Rachel stared at it for a long time, then left it there. She liked the reminder. The courtroom was colder than Rachel expected. Not physically, just quiet, almost clinical. No reporters, no dramatic speeches, just pale wood, gray carpet, and the slow ticking of due process. 3 months had passed since the takedown. The case had gone federal. The Department of Justice, with evidence supplied by Prescott PD, had filed charges against Colin Driggs and 12 other individuals in connection with an organized racketeering scheme. Charges included conspiracy to commit wire fraud, impersonation of law enforcement, unlawful detainment of a minor, intent to defraud through coercion, and, in several cases, attempted kidnapping. Rachel wasn't required to testify in person, but she did. She wanted to. Not for the courtroom, not for the cameras, for Chloe. She stood with steady posture, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the witness box. Her voice didn't waver, but it wasn't rehearsed either. It was the voice of someone who had spent a lifetime preparing for a moment she never asked for. They didn't come to enforce. They came to dominate. They weren't enforcing order. They were counting on silence, on people like me to flinch. She turned her gaze toward Colin Driggs, who sat flanked by attorneys, jaw clenched. He didn't look at her. I didn't flinch. The courtroom was still. The judge nodded, entered her statement into the record, and moved the trial forward. That same week, Driggs took a plea deal, 25 years with no chance of parole, in exchange for full cooperation and the names of other co-conspirators in 3 other states. It was justice, not revenge, not satisfaction, but enough. Outside, the news vans waited. Rachel passed them without a word. She didn't need headlines anymore. Prescott Valley was different now. The HOA board that once ignored concerns about false enforcement was now under a third-party audit, pushed through by a wave of residents who had found their voices again. Several board members resigned quietly. A new one, elected by popular vote, held their first meeting with every chair in the room filled. New policies were drafted, requiring full transparency, banning private contractors from door-to-door enforcement, and installing a neighborhood ombudsman to handle grievances outside of HOA influence. People started talking to each other again, not just waving from driveways, but asking real questions, organizing watch groups, hosting potlucks. Rachel's porch became a symbol, not of trauma, but of resilience. Brian's motion-activated lights? He installed them for 3 other families for free. He also launched a free online workshop, Know Your Rights, What Real Authority Looks Like. Hector was hired by the county as a security consultant for HOA compliance reviews. The mayor even tried to give him a ceremonial badge. He declined, but he kept the plaque. As for Rachel, she turned down every interview. She declined every book deal, every TV reenactment, every offer for a Mom vs. HOA documentary. Instead, she worked with a local nonprofit to develop a free digital handbook, The Front Door Defense Guide, How to Protect Your Family from False Authority. It was downloaded over 100,000 times in the first month. But her most important project? Chloe. On the last day of the school year, Rachel picked her up from class. Chloe bounced out of the building with her backpack dragging and a painting in hand. "It's us," she beamed. "Look," Rachel looked. The painting showed a dinosaur fierce, proud with a big shield that had her initials on it. Next to the dinosaur stood a girl in a cape, hand in hand. They weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were facing the street. Above them were the words, "Our home, our rules." Rachel blinked, smiled, and crouched to her daughter's eye level. "You still like dinosaurs?" she asked. "I like ours best," Chloe said. "She's the only one that doesn't bite unless she has to." Rachel laughed softly. "Smart girl." That night, As Chloe slept, Rachel stepped onto the porch alone. No sirens, no strange vehicles, just the sound of crickets and the hum of the lights Brian had installed long ago. She took a sip of coffee, still wearing her boots, and looked down the quiet, peaceful street. And for the first time in a long time, she believed in quiet again, but she'd never stop listening, just in case.